welcome to a special bonus edition of For Your Imagination. We're here at South by Southwest London, joined by Simon Levitt, our Global Creative Technology Director. Simon, good to have you here. Good to be here.
Hey, Tom, great to be here with you and back for a second year.
I know. And what do you make of South by this year? What's caught your eye?
Yeah, well, it's certainly kudos to the organisers. A lot more seamless, a lot kind of like better kind of like thought through, lots of kind of learnings from the last time. And kind of the best thing about it, I think, is when you wander into a talk or find something new that you're kind of not really expecting, and you get to kind of learn something that comes completely out of the blue to you, not part of your skill set, and you can go back, you can talk about it, and it enables you to think a little bit differently.
Yeah, that's the joy of it. The things you discover, that's what I always find.
Yeah, one of the examples is we went to a talk about how you can use creativity to challenge authoritarianism in kind of like politics, how protests could work creatively, and kind of different kind of like approaches to that. I think it's quite interesting to see like creativity and maybe politics kind of like coming together as a subject matter, and really nice to South by kind of bringing that sort of topics to us.
Super interesting. Yeah, I enjoyed seeing a quantum computer in real life.
Wow,
Yeah,
in real life.
Yeah. And actually in real life that's a pretty good segue to what we're talking about, because one of the big topics obviously is AI. Everybody's talking about AI. Sure. And I guess last year there was quite a lot of discussion about AI at South by, but I think what we're seeing this year is acknowledging the shift from AI as a prompt on a screen to AI in the real world. And, sometimes just it being embedded as a feature within products or within experiences.
Yeah, it's an interesting inflection point, isn't it? I think one of the two things you think about, firstly, is how people are kind of like using it practically at events, at conferences, and also think about what it means for the world kind of more broadly. Over the past year, we've seen a lot more AI content created, a lot more AI content that really isn't very good. This idea of AI slop and the amount of AI slop that's out there. What does that mean for events, for conferences, and how they can react against that? Or what can they do? I think there's a real opportunity about working in the physical world in a way that is different to what you're seeing online now.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. I think the increased popularity of in real life and live events, it's a good time to be in live events.
Yeah. In terms of like how AI can work at conferences, and I think kind of like in general, we should accept that conferences and events are not really future looking and not really great at embracing kind of new technologies in a way that maybe you think they could do. Potentially that is because they're really happy with having people talk to each other. That's the core of it. So why expand beyond that? That's where their kind of focus should be. But we're increasingly seeing more moves towards making the wider technical ecosystem of events better for users. It could be something as simple as like being able to use 5G effectively at an event, being able to kind of get content like really quickly, or something more sophisticated like interesting uses of artificial intelligence in these spaces. I think broadly what they should be doing is three things: removing friction, making the experience more personal for the people doing it, and giving the organisers better intelligence so they can learn from it, make better decisions, and ideally make those kind of decisions in real time. So they're not waiting for another year to actually implement them. They can see what's happening, they can get the information, and they can make the change.
So let's dive into those three things. So thinking about removing friction, what are some of the sort of practical applications of AI that you're seeing or that we're using within our work?
Yeah, I think it can be something really simple like, well, your classic chatbots, isn't it? That like we've all kind of seen them, we've all kind of used them. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. At its most basic, you've got your conference event app that everybody has in downloads, but rather than having to search for something, you can simply ask a question in natural language and get an answer. But I think you can like push that idea further as well. Why just going to use type when you can start to use voice? That's that idea of text to speech is much more mature than it used to be, and you can ask a more verbose question that is more detailed for the information that you need to find much more easily by using voice as opposed to typing. But the event organisers then need to make sure that information is placed in a way that is searchable in a knowledge base for the artificial intelligence agent to come back with the information to them.
And I guess one of the things that's shifted is the ability to change that interface, right? So it doesn't have to be, it could be a voice interface, it could be on a mobile. It's the sort of thing that you can picture in the real world.
Yeah, you don't even have to have it go with you, right, Tom? You could kind of like have something that is there, has a feature of the conference of the event that kind of represents it. It doesn't even need to be a digital interface, really.
Right.
You could have a robot doing it. You could have maybe some sort of puppet talking kind of back to you, depending on what the intent of the conference or the event is. We're a tech conference, really, so we're kind of like thinking about it through the lens of creativity, of people who are more kind of technical, of people who are in music and people who are in films. But think of like these kind of like bigger film conferences, comic book conferences that they have, and how wild you could go with your imagination about how you could represent that physically.
Right, so you can actually make a feature of it, create some sort of experience around it.
Yeah, indeed.
If you could talk to anybody, who would you want? Or if you could get help from anybody, who would you want help from?
Well, CP3O kind of like, could be coming to your rescue in multiple languages and telling you where you should be going next with a huff and a puff, a bit annoyed at the question.
What about the perennial problem, queues? Could it solve queues? Are you seeing anything around that?
Well,
Queuing
fair
or
to South by, they've got something in app at the moment which is telling you where events are busy, when they're not very busy, when you can get in, and I think that's kind of an effective idea. Very difficult to implement though, because if doors are just opened and lots of people are coming in, then you've got to very quickly adapt to going from it's empty to it's fairly busy to actually it's full, and knowing if you've got time to get there or not, that's very difficult to gauge. So I think like another way of doing that would be a visual representation of it, which would be kind of like showing it kind of like filling up, showing that the doors are just open, showing it filling up, showing that you do actually have time to get there from your current location,
right,
and be able to kind of like get in.
These are all quite interesting because they're very simple questions, but I suppose when you connect them all together, it's a great application for AI to be able to ask these nuanced questions about where I am, how full it is, the sorts of things I'm interested in. Is that, that sort of application?
I think it's also about interpreting the data more quickly in a way that you couldn't do before, and then applying it in a different format that you couldn't do before. That's the power that artificial intelligence lends you in a way that we couldn't have done a few years ago.
Yeah. Okay, so it's some interesting applications for where we can use it. I love the idea of better intel for the organizers and back of house. One of the things that we wanted to dive into, because I know your team at Imagination have been looking at it, is the idea of simultaneous translation. So how do you open up access to people who perhaps don't speak English, but there's a huge amount of content here. It's something that we see a lot in event and conference planning, and on the surface, it seems like a pretty obvious application, plug and play. So, let's talk about that. And we called this session the cocktail party problem, right? And for those who don't know, the cocktail party problem is an acknowledged technology problem about needing the difficulty in making sense of what's going on in a noisy and complicated social interactions. So when you're at a cocktail party problem, as humans, we find it very easy to discern who's talking to who, what are they trying to communicate? Because often we don't just communicate with what with the words that we say, but how we're saying them, the body language, who's looking at who matters. All of that data that floats around a live exhibition hall is really hard to make sense of, right? It's the kind of frontier of AI and sensory interpretation.
Yeah, and the complexity of voice and understanding voice. One of the big challenges, but also one of the big opportunities for events and conferences is being able to translate audio coming from the main speaker into multiple language for whoever needs to be consuming it in the language that they're most comfortable in. We're very lucky kind of speaking English, we're kind of very used to it, but not everybody is, and it's a big world out there. So how do you open that up and make it kind of more accessible for other conference attendees? Well, traditionally, what they've been doing is human translators. You can imagine the classic scenario maybe in the UN or something like that, where everybody's got their earpieces in, it's being translated into everybody's native languages, and that's how you're hearing it. But that isn't really attainable for lots of conferences and events, simply due to the cost factor.
Sure.
You need to employ a highly skilled person and give them a hotel room, and do that for a large number of
Yeah.
languages.
How do you choose the languages? Which one's most important?
Well, exactly. Yeah, kind of where the Swaziland coming onto the
Yeah.
list. Like what do you prioritize, and then is that taken away from the people who then can't attend? And do they kind of feel bad about
Yeah.
the conference, have a bad energy in terms of thinking about it? So one of the promises that we've seen from AI is being able to counter that by this idea of simultaneous AI translation. These translations that could happen from the person speaking automatically going into the ear of somebody else in their chosen language.
So, and as it was it Arthur C. Clarke who said technology, when it's working perfectly, should be indistinguishable from magic. Is that him?
It sure was. And I think your idea of the Babel fish as well.
Babel fish from Hitchhiker's Guide. I mean, isn't it amazing? We live in this era where you describe something which is kind of magic, and we look at it and we go, well, yeah, that's obvious. It's simple, right? To go from an audio input plug it into Magic AI and take it out as a different language. It should be pretty simple.
Well, I wish it was simple, Tom, because it is highly complex behind the scenes. What we're doing is we're taking the transcript of the voice that you can hear, you're putting it into text actually. So it's called text to speech, that process. Then you get that text document, and that's when the translation happens. It's not happening directly with the voice, it's happening with that text document. It is being translated and it is put back into a voice for then that person to hear. Right. So it's going through a lot of different stages, usually going through it on the cloud as well, and having to do it very, very rapidly. What you're kind of looking for is the transcription quality. Is it make sense that what I have said is what can be read on the text format afterwards? The translation quality, does then the translation to the next language actually kind of hold true when it moves from English, say, to Italian, for example? How quickly can then you do that in a way that means that you haven't lost the thread of the conversation that's going on, the visual representations you're seeing on the screen make sense, and speakers haven't left 20 minutes ago catching up on conversation?
Okay, so that's the nuts and bolts of how it works. There are plenty of tools out there that do that. Is that true? I mean,
there are a lot of tools that claim that they can do this to a very, very high quality.
Right.
Some of them are claiming very high percentages of accuracy across multiple languages without any failure. And this is really what we wanted to examine and test to see if these claims were true, and to see if you could reasonably remove a high quality human from the translation experience, put it in AI, and you could still have the same experience for your delegate at the end.
And I think this is really important, right? Because this is the crunch point that we're at. Everything is possible. Prototypes are impressive. But what we're talking about is doing it in the real world, in the messy environment that we're in, to a degree of quality that you'd expect from, top tier conferences. So, I think it's an important question. And so I'd like to just really dig in and geek out on what your team did to take a series of these tools and really submit them to some quite forensic testing against specific measures and benchmarks. So what did you do?
Yeah, so we took 3 AI simultaneous translation tools. We chose that from a great number of them. These were the ones who had the most credibility by looking at case studies online. They're the ones that offered demos, and the ones who offered price points which we thought were reasonable and attainable for events and conferences. From that, we did a deep analysis using videos taken from other conferences. Some of people speaking in a native US accent, but some of people speaking English, but with a Spanish accent.
Got it.
And this is important because not everybody speaks the same.
Of course.
So what's it like translating somebody who is from deepest black country like I am, or somebody who's from Midwest Texas? So that was the first stage.
Can it understand the accent?
Can it understand the accent, and therefore what is the transcription quality for that?
And can it turn it into English? Yeah.
And the next stage is like not just doing that for a snippet of information, but doing it for a whole talk. Can it do it for 30, 40 minutes consistently at a high quality? Because latency is really important. And if, as we were saying kind of before, you end up kind of like not hearing it close to kind of real time, then the idea of like what you're hearing and what you're seeing becomes negated. So we had very high standards for that. We wanted latency to be kind of like between 4 and 8 seconds.
So you're saying 4 seconds between the English input and the
Of the language
Spanish output.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. That.
In speech. Yeah.
In speech. And the next part, that translation quality, we were kind of deep diving into about not just kind of the normal translations it was making, but where it might stumble. So, for example, what we call brand lexicon, things that brands would say which are specific to the information that they're getting across. How would the simultaneous translation technologies be able to cope with that?
Sorry, let me just make sure I've got that clear. So these are kind of specific words that this organization might use. For example, these are not words in general English vocabulary, but they're kind of, perhaps they're invented words, or they are, is that right? Technical words?
Yeah, exactly. We work with a lot of automotive companies, and they would have a series of numbers and codes, for example, for something that you want to keep consistent. You don't want to be translated because they are consistent across all of the markets that they're talking to.
Got it.
So when should you do a translation and when shouldn't you do a translation? Because when you are working with big brands like we do, it could go from making the speech intelligent to unintelligent.
Completely nonsensical. If you don't read a code, if you turn a code into a word, for example, okay.
The results were really interesting. By our kind of benchmarks that we put forward, all of the services failed to meet any of our benchmarks.
Yeah. And the benchmark, did you have a human benchmark?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the benchmarks are kind of different depending on the different types of criteria. And the reason we had to kind of like come up with this benchmark ourselves is because this sort of testing hasn't happened yet, right? Yeah. This is the frontier of it. The frontier of creating it, sure, but then the frontier of testing its quality. Second, does it actually work to the quality level that we needed to for the particular instances? Yeah. So these kind of pass-fail scores are actually coming from other places. So, for example, the latency is actually coming from TV. Like what is the latency when you're seeing TV translations coming on screen?
What's the acceptable latency?
The acceptable latency, yeah. So we're researching other systems to put together our benchmarks for this test week.
Good. Okay. And so you're saying none of them met the requirements for what we determined to be a decent experience from the end user?
Not by our estimations.
Okay. But were there any that were good enough?
At the moment, we're working with one called Kudo, and the reason we are working with them is because they were the ones that passed our scores with the highest threshold. Right. They did a really good job at accuracy. They did a good job with quality. Their latency wasn't too bad. But what was kind of really interesting with that, and with all of the others, the translation quality, as far as we determined it, wasn't always consistent across languages. Some of them did French better than others. Some of them did Russian better than others. Some of them Chinese better than others.
And why is that? Is that because is it the data set they're trained on? Or
yeah, I think you would need to assume that is the case, that the underlying large language models that they're using react differently to different languages.
So is there an opportunity? Like, is there a language you can tell us there's an opportunity? There's a market out there that's really badly served. What language would you advise?
It's Arabic from things we've seen, and not just because of the translation quality, but what we call the quality of the voice that actually is kind of like coming back to you. Does it sound like a human? Is it paced correctly? Are there lilts to the sentences, or is it mechanical, robot-like? Yeah. There's a lot of difficulty with an Arabic voice in that, and we stepped away from actually doing simultaneous translation with AI in some of our conferences because the perceived quality simply wasn't high enough.
Okay, so are you saying never use these, or how do you look at it in terms of recommendations for people who are thinking about live events?
The way I put it is as follows: if you've never had any translation services at your events, at your conferences, then going from that to offering AI simultaneous translation will seem like a step up. It'd be a good service to offer. Hopefully people would use it. and they would be forgiving, knowing that it's an AI that it's not 100% accurate all the time.
Yeah.
If you're used to offering high-end, high-quality human translation services across the event, and you're moving from that to wholly AI services, it's going to seem like a step down, and people are going to be disappointed by it. So I think it really has to be estimated by what is your starting point as an event, as a conference.
It's so interesting because I think this taps into this idea of AI is going to destroy jobs. Because there's one way of looking at this and going, well, the human translation job is no more. You know, it's going to be superseded. But potentially what you're saying is that this means there's going to be more access to translation for people who couldn't afford it, but human first translation is going to be the premium product that still supersedes these off-the-shelf plug-and-play products
For the near future.
Yeah.
But 3 years ago, we wouldn't have thought we'd ever be doing this experiment.
As they say, this is the worst it'll ever be.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, really interesting. Okay, well, thank you for that. I mean, there's a lot more to dig into in terms of what you guys did and what you found, and yeah, I think happy to, I'm sure, for you to speak further for anyone who's interested in that. But why don't we just end off by looking forwards? The future. What are you excited about? What do you see coming? Humans and AI within this space.
I remember seeing at CES a while ago this LED screen that was able to show you different information depending on who was looking at it. So you're all looking at the same LED screen, but you all saw different information.
Right.
It had this.
How did it do that?
It had this new kind of pixel technology, which essentially sent this information directly to you, depending on where you were inside it. Yeah, so you were seeing different light depending on where you are. Well, cut to a few years later, that is now out and about in the real world at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. Well, imagine combining that technology with people walking through a conference, telling them exactly what their itinerary should be, where they should be going, what direction should be.
Should I say it? It sounds like Minority Report. I think all these conversations, that's how they all end, right? Sounds like Minority Report.
Well, that's where we're going, but hopefully without the dystopian endings.
Yes. Yeah. Love it. Great. Well, thank you so much, Simon. It's been really good. I think good to be thinking about, good to be at that stage where we can say, how can this technology be reliably implemented rather than we can be dazzled by what's possible and prototypes. And I just love the methodology that you and your team used. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Cheers, everyone.